Hi, I'm Ricky Warren here for Gravity Fitness again. I'm here to show you how to use a professional false grip. So the first thing I want to tell you about false grip is that if you don't use it, you're not going to be able to get up and down on the rings. That's very important. So the reason we want to do false grip is it gives us full control of the wrist and of the arm while we're using the rings. You see, if I use a hanging grip like this, then when my wrist moves, the ring also moves. And I don't really have control. But if I use my false grip, you'll see that I have complete control of the ring. So the first part of the false grip is we're going to imagine the rings as a clock, yeah? So we're going to go to 9 o'clock on the right hand with the thumb and the index finger. Grab that, go to 3 o'clock on the left as well. Now once you've grabbed the rings, we're going to bring our wrists and our elbows in and down, so that we're putting pressure through the wrist into the ring. So if you don't use a false grip like this, your wrist is going to slip off the rings eventually and you're not going to have full control. You're also not going to be able to recover from that to get back on top of the rings. So false grip is extremely important for doing different postures and going up and down on the rings. Now before we try and do a dead hang or a pull-up using false grip, we're just going to do a squat with it so that we can learn the wrist movement. So grab your false grip, squat down underneath the rings, and straighten your arms like this. So you want your wrists turned out with straight elbows, straight arms. And then when you start to pull up, we're going to start squatting at the same time. We're doing this so that we can take the pressure off the wrist and that we can focus on the movement. So when we pull in first, we want to bring the hands in towards the chest and turn the wrists in. You see that? We go back to the beginning. From out, turn the wrists in and pull towards the chest. Now once we get high enough, that's about shoulder or chest level, then we're going to turn these rings and the wrists outwards. And then when we drop down, we're going to reverse that movement.
Okay, I just got this. What I'm doing now.
One more time. So when we pull up, we're going to pull our wrists in like this and then rotate out at the top, back in and drop down to the bottom. So just remember one thing, when you are using this false grip, make sure you actually grip the rings. Don't just rest your wrist on there and go limp. We need to have a solid grip on the rings, driving the wrists into the rings and dropping the elbow down. That's going to keep the weight going through this pivot point here, this fulcrum. So you are going to develop some calluses and some pain here in the beginning, but that's normal. That happens with bars as well here. You guys should know that. That's all part of the development and the conditioning. So I'm also just going to show you quickly how to chalk your wrists. So the main parts that are going to be in contact with the ring are here for the false grip. And then we're going to go across the palm at the bottom, just for that roll through when we do muscle ups. And onto the thumb. Yep. And then we'll just go across the fingers where they'll grip the ring. And that really is all you need. You can sometimes also put a little bit in here. I like to do that sometimes. And that's your chalk setup. So here again, for where the false grip's going to come in. Make sure you go right down the wrist a little bit because it is going to slide up and down your wrist. Then we go across the palm, up the thumb a little bit. And then inside this little gap if you want. And across the top of the fingers where you're going to grip the ring. I'll show you from this angle. 9 o'clock, wrist and elbow down, so that you're resting this part of your wrist onto the actual ring. Can you see that? So this is really where we want to be holding the false grip. You don't want to be using this part of your palm. So a lot of common mistakes. Some people's false grip looks like this.
No, well, that's what I remember from.
That angle is too low. We need the wrist to be rolled like this. Some people hold like this. Not enough of the wrist is touching the rings. We need the wrist on the rings so that we can use the biomechanical advantage, but also to be able to get on top and underneath. If you lose that false grip, you're not going to be able to get up and down. You'll only be able to stay underneath the rings. False grip is really important to keep control so that we can get above the rings and below the rings. If you lose false grip, you will not be able to muscle yourself back up because the movement will come from the wrist and the ring will shake. With false grip, the ring is fully under our control and attached to the wrist. Now at this point, if you practice that, what I want you to do is just do a gentle squat underneath and do this. So we're going to pull with the squat and get used to feeling the wrists move through the required mobility to keep the false grip. You see that? So I'm keeping my wrists on top. As I go down, I'm dropping my elbows and keeping my knuckles rolled over the rings. I'm keeping my elbows nice and tight. Keep my knuckles over the rings and my wrists on top of the rings. And then turn my wrists out at the bottom. Pull up. And out. Yeah? So when we're doing ring pull up with false grip, I'm just going to show you the pattern that we use for the wrists to help increase the strength and endurance of them when we're on the ring, so that we can do other positions and other postures. So I'm going to show you the pattern for how we move our wrists now when we do a false grip ring pull up, or even just in general when we go up and down on the rings. So let's say we start from here, underneath the rings in a pull up position, but we're going to keep our feet on the ground so that we can focus on the rings and not make it too hard. So first we establish our false grip, pull our elbows underneath and our wrists on top of the rings. Now what we do want to be, how we want to be in the start is with our arms out like this. And they would be above your head, but just so we can get used to the wrists, we'll stay like this one. Then, as soon as you start to pull, you want to turn your palms inwards and pull towards your chest, like this. Yeah? You see that? So from outwards, you're coming inwards, and pulling in. Now once you get to the level where your hands are at your chest, then we're going to flick them outwards in case we want to muscle up or in case we want to come back down. So the full movement looks like this. Yeah? So then if we were doing a muscle up, you can see how the false grip is used now. And then you've got this gap here, see? Now we're still on top of the rings, and then we're going to press to the top of the muscle up. So, bearing that in mind, how can we practice the false grip while we do our pull-ups and while we do our reps? I'm going to show you that now, how we can make it a little bit easier and we can focus more on the wrists. So grab a resistance band. I think this one's about 15 to 20 kilos resistance from Gravity Fitness. And you can use whichever size of resistance band you want, really. The resistance is based on what level you're at in terms of your pulling power. But what this exercise is for is to develop the accuracy and the control coming from the wrist and the false grip. So don't worry too much about having to use a heavier band. It's probably better. We want to focus less on the actual pulling and more on the control from the wrist. So firstly, I'm going to wrap this behind my back like this and loop my hands through the gap. What that's going to do is provide me a little seat, yeah, and that's going to take some of the pressure off and the weight off when I'm pulling up. So we're going to go here, put it behind your butt, and then pull up to the rings on your tiptoes and establish your false grip. Now when you sit down, you're going to see that band gives you so much room. You see? Nice and easy. I don't even have to do anything, look. Okay? So if we then drop down here, now when we pull, nice and slow into the middle, and then extend outwards at the top. Yep, roll out, roll in, pull up, roll out, roll in, drop down, and roll out.